If you asked an economist 10 years ago who was most likely to lose their job to a machine, they would have confidently pointed to the factory floor.
Right.
You know,
Absolutely.
the assembly line worker, the warehouse packer. But today, well, the data shows the people most in the crosshairs of automation aren't wearing hard hats at all.
No, they're really not.
They are highly paid, highly educated professionals, sitting in glass offices. We are talking about the folks who honestly thought a master's degree was like a permanent shield against technological displacement.
Yeah, that was the grand assumption for decades. I mean, the whole knowledge worker invincibility myth.
Exactly. So as we sit here in early 2026, with the technology already actively deployed across the corporate world, it forces this massive question. Why haven't we seen a catastrophic wave of white-collar unemployment?
Right.
Where is the actual data showing the impact of this AI revolution on our daily work? And that is what we are unpacking today.
Welcome to the deep dive, by the way. Thanks. And, that gap between our collective panic and the reality we are actually experiencing, that's the most vital puzzle in economics right now.
Because everyone was terrified, right?
Oh, entirely.
Yeah.
We spent years bracing for this overnight apocalypse. We basically assumed the algorithms would simply come for everyone's desk on a random Tuesday.
Just pack up your boxes, the AI is here.
Right. But what we're actually navigating is this widening, complex divide between theoretical capability, what an AI can do in a sterile lab, and real-world deployment.
Which are two very different things.
Completely different.
Yeah.
And understanding why those two things are different is really the only way to figure out who is actually in danger right now.
And to crack that puzzle, we are digging into a highly pivotal new research paper by Dr. Jonathan H. Westover. It's called AI Displacement Risk in the Labor Market.
It's a fantastic piece of research.
It really is. So the mission for our deep dive today is to basically strip away all the lingering science fiction hype. We're looking at the hard, empirical evidence to answer three things for you.
Right. We need to know who is truly at risk.
Exactly. Who is at risk? What is the data telling us right this second? And most importantly, what is the actual survival playbook for organizations trying to manage this transition without destroying their workforce?
Dr. Westover's research is so compelling here because it refuses to let us rely on simple extrapolations. Like, we have to look at the severe friction of implementation.
Okay, let's unpack this. What do you mean by friction?
Well, to even begin understanding the threat to your job, we have to completely redefine what the word exposure means. The fundamental misunderstanding driving all this panic is that people conflate automating a task with automating a job.
I want to break that down because it sounds like just semantics, but it's really the core of the whole issue. A job is not just one thing, right? It's a bundle of tasks.
Exactly, a whole bundle.
So an AI might be incredibly proficient at drafting a routine email or, I don't know, summarizing a 50-page quarterly earnings report in 3 seconds. Those are tasks.
Right, isolated tasks.
But the AI is not sitting in the conference room looking the client in the eye. It isn't reading the room to see if the CFO is getting nervous during the pitch.
No, you can't do that.
The complex, nuanced negotiation based on that report, that is the actual job.
Yeah, it is the human application of the output.
Cool.
When researchers looked at the theoretical capability of large language models back in 2023, this is work by Elandu and colleagues, they found something terrifying on paper.
The capability metrics were huge.
Massive. They found a huge chunk of knowledge work tasks could be sped up by at least 50%. And, I mean, if you only look at that metric, you panic.
Sure, because it sounds like half your day is obsolete.
Right. But Westover's paper contrasts that with some incredibly sobering 2026 data from researchers Massenkoff and McCrory.
Oh, this is the deployment data.
Yes. They looked at observed real-world deployment, and they found that even if 90% of an office administrator's tasks are theoretically exposed to AI, a company actually deploys the AI for a third or less of those tasks.
Wow, only a third. Because, can the software do it and will the corporate lawyers actually let the software do it are two entirely different universes.
They really are. Massenkoff and McCrory highlight these massive organizational frictions. I mean, think about strict data privacy requirements alone.
Oh, yeah. The compliance side is a nightmare.
Right. A financial analyst cannot legally feed sensitive, unreleased client data into a public language model just to save an hour of formatting.
They'd get fired on the spot.
Exactly. And then there is the verification bottleneck. We know these models can hallucinate or, invent plausible-sounding facts.
Yeah, the AI just confidently lies to you.
Right. Therefore, a human being with deep domain expertise still has to review the AI's work to ensure it didn't just invent a fictional legal precedent. Those frictions act as a giant speed bump for corporate adoption.
It's like buying a sports car capable of going 200 miles per hour, but your daily commute is in rush hour city traffic.
That is the perfect analogy.
The capability is absolutely there under the hood, right? The engine is roaring. But the environment you are forced to operate in completely restricts your speed. You are still crawling along bumper to bumper.
Yeah. And that diffusion lag, the gap between the invention of the engine and the clearing of the roads, is something we see in almost every historical tech wave.
Like with electricity.
Exactly. When factories transitioned from steam to electric power, it took decades to reorganize the floor plans to actually reap the efficiency gains.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize it took decades.
Yeah. Because of this traffic jam of organizational friction, the near-term displacement of workers is far more gradual than the worst-case scenarios predicted.
Yeah.
We aren't falling off a cliff. We are basically walking down a slope.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Because the people standing on that slope look completely different than they did in past waves of automation.
They do. It's a totally new demographic.
If the AI is bottlenecked by these frictions, and its primary utility right now is churning through text-based cognitive tasks, who is actually in the crosshairs today?
Well, the roles with 50 to 75% of their tasks covered by AI right now are computer programmers, customer service representatives, data entry keyers, and financial analysts.
So mostly desk jobs.
Right. Contrast that with roles showing zero exposure, like cooks, healthcare aides, construction workers.
Because the software isn't pouring a drink or checking a patient's pulse.
Exactly. It needs a physical presence.
Yeah.
This creates a really wild demographic plot twist.
Yeah, let's talk about the twist.
Massenkoff and McCrory found the most exposed workers right now are older, highly educated, higher paid, and disproportionately female, white, or Asian.
I want to highlight a statistic from the sources that totally shatters our conventional wisdom here. Workers with graduate degrees make up just 4.5% of the completely unexposed group.
Right.
But they make up a massive 17% of the highly exposed group. I mean, for decades, the narrative was that manual labor was the danger zone. Now, the danger zone is the corner office.
It completely inverts the historical narrative. And if we look at how a corporation actually operates, this presents a severe, almost existential risk to the business itself.
Hope so.
Well, these highly exposed workers are the ones holding the deep institutional knowledge. They possess the specialized skills and, the complex social capital.
They know where the bodies are buried.
Exactly. They know how the company actually gets things done, which is rarely what's written in the official employee handbook.
But look, if I'm a cost-obsessed CFO listening to this, and I see a software subscription that can handle 70% of a senior financial analyst job in 3 seconds, my first instinct is absolutely going to be to reduce my headcount.
Of course it is.
I mean, it looks incredible on the quarterly balance sheet. Why shouldn't I just fire them and save the money?
Because you aren't just cutting a salary, you are amputating the firm's institutional memory.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, research on task interdependencies cautions heavily against this kind of simplistic substitution logic. If you fire the analyst because the AI can build the spreadsheet, who actually catches the strategic error in the numbers?
Right. Who knows the context?
Exactly. Who knows which department head needs to be massaged to approve the budget? You might save a few $1,000,000 this quarter, but you degrade morale, destroy organizational capacity, and potentially trigger massive legal challenges.
Just because you ripped out the human judgment that was quietly holding the whole operation together?
Precisely. It's incredibly short-sighted.
Okay. But if executives are holding off on mass layoffs to protect that institutional memory, why isn't the data showing any major waves of displacement? Because when researchers look at the aggregate unemployment numbers through early 2025, there is no systematic increase in unemployment for these highly exposed white-collar workers.
Right. The bottom didn't fall out of the job market.
Exactly. So where is the disruption?
Well, the absence of aggregate displacement does not imply an absence of change. The disruption is definitely happening. It is just happening stealthily.
Under the radar.
Yes. And it is hitting one specific demographic incredibly hard. Young workers.
Yes, the youth data in this deep dive is completely sobering. Studies by Brynjolfsson and colleagues found a 6 to 16% employment decline for workers aged 22 to 25 in these exposed roles.
That's a massive drop for an entry-level cohort.
It is. And Massenkoff and McCrory found that young workers' monthly job-finding rates in these fields plummeted by about 14% compared to the baseline before the technology launched.
And what's fascinating here is that drop is driven almost entirely by reduced hiring, not increased layoffs of incumbents.
Wait, really? So instead of a company pushing older, highly paid incumbents out the back door with messy, expensive severance packages,
Right.
they are just quietly locking the front door for new college grads.
Exactly. They use the AI to absorb the grunt work that a junior employee would have historically done. And that feels very safe for the company in the short term.
Sure, you avoid the terrible PR of a mass layoff, and you trim the budget without anyone noticing.
Right. But by doing that, you are actively destroying the traditional apprenticeship dynamic of knowledge work.
Let's use an analogy here for you listening. Relying on AI to replace entry-level talent is like a city cutting the roots off all its oak trees to save water during a drought.
Oh, that's grim but accurate.
Right. Today, the trees look perfectly fine, the leaves are green, but you've destroyed the foundation. In 5 years, when the next major storm hits, those trees are going to completely topple over because there's nothing grounding them.
Yeah, because how does a junior financial analyst become a senior financial analyst?
By doing the grunt work.
Exactly. By formatting the reports, making stupid mistakes, and having a senior person correct them. That friction, that process of making mistakes and correcting them, is the mechanism for skill accumulation.
So if a company leans on AI to replace entry-level roles, how do they build their future leadership pipeline?
They don't. In a decade, where do the senior managers come from if junior talent is never brought into the building to learn the ropes?
You just end up with a hollowed-out organization featuring brilliant algorithms but zero human bench strength to guide them.
It's a huge structural vulnerability.
But realizing your youth pipeline is drying up doesn't fix the immediate problem for the workers currently sitting in the building. Employees read the news, they know the technology exists, and frankly, they are terrified.
Understandably so.
So how do organizations keep their current staff from completely panicking? Because Westover's research actually provides a very specific organizational playbook to survive this without violating employee trust, right?
Yes, it outlines 5 key pillars. And the very first pillar of that playbook is radical, transparent communication.
Meaning no corporate speak.
Exactly. Ambiguity is the breeding ground for anxiety. If an employee doesn't know what the AI is going to do, they assume it's coming for their entire livelihood.
Right, they picture the worst case scenario.
The research highlights Salesforce as a model here because they utilize scenario-based planning and communicate it directly to the staff. They literally map job roles down to the task level.
I love the mechanics of this because it essentially shrinks the monster in the closet.
Oh, completely.
If you just say, AI is rolling out next week, a worker pictures a robot physically sitting in their office chair. But if you break their job down and say, look, we are automating this specific data fetching task on Wednesday mornings, but we still need you to analyze the data on Thursday, you instantly lower their psychological defenses.
Yes, you show them the AI is a tool taking over a chore, not a replacement for their actual identity. It shifts the entire framing.
But communication alone doesn't sustain trust if the eventual outcomes feel arbitrary, does it?
No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
And this brings us to the second pillar, which is procedural fairness.
Okay, tell us about that.
Behavioral scientists have studied this for decades. Human beings are actually wired to accept a negative outcome, even a shift in role or a reduction in hours, as long as they genuinely believe the process that got them there was transparent and objective.
It's the difference between our referee calling a foul based on a clear rule book versus a referee just blowing the whistle because they don't like you.
Exactly. IBM uses what they call a skills-first approach that really exemplifies this. They use transparent skill assessments, but more importantly, they provide actual grievance mechanisms.
Wait, grievance mechanisms for AI deployment?
Yeah. An employee can contest the data being used to evaluate their exposure to automation. It treats the worker like an adult partner rather than a line item on a spreadsheet.
Treating them as partners is crucial for the third pillar too, which is reskilling. And the paper is incredibly explicit here. Generic, off-the-shelf training modules are a complete waste of time and money.
Absolute waste.
Sending your staff a link to a weekend webinar on the future of tech does not bridge the competence gap at all.
No, you need contextualized, on-the-job learning. If you are going to change the tools, you have to invest real money in teaching people how to use them.
And the scale of investment required is massive. The research points back to AT&T's Future Ready initiative from the mid-2010s.
Right. That was a huge pivot for them.
When their core network technology shifted, they didn't just fire the old staff and hire new people. They spent over $1 billion retraining their workforce. That is the blueprint.
Yes. You teach a customer service rep how to oversee and course correct the specific conversational AI your company uses, and you do it during paid working hours.
And that contextualized training naturally feeds into the fourth pillar, which is work reorganization. Because if the AI successfully automates a tedious task, you don't just leave a 2-hour hole in the person's schedule.
No, and you certainly don't penalize their efficiency by cutting their pay. You engage in task recombination.
Tell us how Unilever is doing this, because this sounds like the most practical solution for a mid-sized company. They use internal talent marketplaces. How does that actually change a Tuesday for an employee?
Well, imagine an employee who previously spent 15 hours a week doing routine data entry.
Okay.
The AI takes that over. In a traditional, rigid structure, that employee is now highly vulnerable. But with a talent marketplace, their hidden skills are tracked by the company.
So they aren't just defined by data entry.
Right. That employee can log into an internal platform and bid on cross-functional projects. Suddenly, they are spending those 15 hours doing quality assurance for a new product launch or handling complex customer escalations that require high emotional intelligence. You enrich the role.
You move the human being up the value chain. They stop being a data processor and start being a strategist.
Exactly. It's a win-win. But, we also have to remain grounded in reality here.
Because it's not all sunshine and rainbows.
No. Even with transparent communication, fair processes, reskilling, and talent marketplaces, displacement is sometimes just unavoidable. Certain roles will simply shrink.
So what happens then?
The fifth pillar addresses this directly: financial and benefit supports. When a company has to let people go, the precedent set by General Motors during their 2019 plant closures remains the gold standard.
What did GM do?
They provided extensive retraining grants, extended health benefits, and relocation assistance. It cushions the economic shock for the worker and signals good faith to the employees who remain.
Because the remaining employees are watching how you treat people on the way out.
Always.
Taking a step back and looking at all 5 of these pillars, it fundamentally rewrites the relationship between an employer and an employee.
It's a completely new era.
Right. For you, listening to this deep dive and thinking about your own career trajectory, this might be the most vital paradigm shift to absorb. The old psychological contract is completely dead.
It really is.
The old deal was, give the company your unwavering loyalty, do exactly what you were told, and they will give you a stable, predictable job for 30 years. That era is over.
It is entirely over. The new psychological contract requires mutual investment in employability, built on lifelong learning.
So it's a two-way street now.
Exactly. The organization's responsibility is to provide the resources, the transparency, and the on-the-job training. But your responsibility as the employee is continuous adaptability. Relying on static expertise, like doing things the exact way you learned to do them a decade ago, is no longer a guarantee of security.
Which means organizations have to build a culture where adaptation feels safe, not punitive. You can't just have a small handful of executives making secretive decisions about AI implementation.
No, the research strongly suggests you need distributed governance. Things like AI ethics and implementation committees that include actual representation from the workforce.
Because if the workforce views the technology as a weapon deployed by management to cut costs and track their every move,
you will inevitably face quiet sabotage. Morale will plummet, and your most talented people, the ones with the deep institutional memory you desperately need, will just walk out the door.
but if you implement shared governance,
Then the AI is viewed as an amplifier of the company's core mission, becomes a tool that actually helps the staff do their best work.
let's synthesize the journey we've been on today. We started with the sheer panic of late 2022, but when we strip away the hype and look at the empirical data, we see that AI is not causing an overnight job apocalypse.
Right, the data just doesn't support that panic.
It is a slow structural shift. And the great irony is that it's targeting the highly educated, wholly paid knowledge workers who previously felt totally immune to automation.
The corner office is the new target.
Yeah. And the immediate impact isn't mass layoffs of senior staff. It's a silent stealth squeeze on entry-level hiring that threatens the long-term health of our organizational pipelines.
And navigating that reality requires leaders to abandon the simplistic idea that a software program can just cleanly substitute a human being. They have to embrace a rigorous playbook of transparency, procedural fairness, and deep, ongoing investment in human capital.
So what does this all mean for you? Tomorrow morning, when you open your laptop, I highly encourage you to do a brutal audit of your own daily tasks. Separate the routine chores as a language model could theoretically do from the areas where your human judgment, your ability to navigate office politics, and your complex interpersonal relationships are entirely irreplaceable.
That's brilliant advice.
Because leaning into that messy human space is where your future value lies.
That is the ultimate personal strategy.
Yeah.
And considering everything we've discussed today, especially that sports car stuck in the traffic jam of organizational friction, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought.
Okay, let's hear.
Let's assume companies do eventually clear the road. Let's say they aggressively automate all those entry-level routine cognitive tasks, and they completely stop hiring junior talent to save money.
The roots are cut.
Right. 10 years from now, when the current senior experts have all naturally retired, who will actually have the foundational ground-up human experience required to validate, manage, and correct the AI when it inevitably makes a high-stakes catastrophic mistake.